How's it going, everybody? So, I just wanted to comment briefly on the nature of law, just in context of many of the recent shootings that have happened, especially with police officers toward minorities. And the nature of the law, as we've recently been reminded of, especially with these shootings, is death. The law is effectively men and women with guns who will go and use force against people in order to enforce those laws, and any resistance to that can lead up to death. And so, whenever a law is passed, it really shouldn't be thought of as, oh, it's just something that people should do. Really, law is nothing more than a death threat. And so any law that's passed shouldn't be put forward unless a death threat is really warranted. And unfortunately, the nature of the law, as it's been grown so large, thanks to all the regulatory bodies that put out different types of rules, that it's not even agencies that have any sort of public oversight or elections. Not that really matters, but there's no sort of way to check that type of power. These agencies just make all these rules, and now you have all these bodies of law coming together with an over 80,000 page tax code and all these different types of local rules and so on and so forth. All these different laws coming out, and everybody is basically a criminal because of the amount of overbreadth of laws that are out there. And with all these laws being out there, it really means that everybody is out there with a virtual death threat on them, just by living. There's a great book out there too. I mentioned this before. 3 felonies a day. How the average person can commit up to 3 felonies a day, just based on interpretations of federal statutes. And it's just absolutely insane the amount of death threats that are out there, and it really should be a point of thought for people to say that the only things for which there should be a type of law or real type of governance, in which there's going to be deadly force, should be things that merit those things. And this over-regulation, over-criminalization of everything that people are doing has just reached a tipping point. And I think especially those who are affected are those who have had traditional types of oppression against them, especially minorities, especially people in poor areas, where police often will focus their criminal patrols, looking for ways to ticket people or pull people over for anything that maybe the average person might not experience as heavily if they live in a nicer area, or maybe have a different kind of a background or nationality or origin. And so it's something that I think everyone should take time to consider, to think, is this law really worth a death threat? Because if it's not, it really shouldn't be a law. And for me, that means that anything that doesn't have a victim, anything that doesn't have an element of physical violence to it, there really shouldn't be a law in the traditional sense that's enforced with people who have guns. Really, that means that things like murder, things like rape, things like battery or aggravated battery, things that involve, people actually being hurt, that should involve death threats to stop, where people, their bodies are being violated, where people are being attacked, and so on and so forth. Anything less than that, they're turning mundane behavior into potential death traps, and people are getting pulled over for traffic stops, and then police are reacting because maybe that person has a gun and it's lawfully owned. Maybe they're just afraid because they've been told these kinds of people could be terrorists or something like that, and so someone's naturally scared if they get pulled over by cops and they're not exactly sure where to put their hands, or they get confused by the officer's directions. Then it leads to more violence, and it needs to be de-escalated systemically. Laws should not be put on the books willy-nilly as they have been, and the U.S. legal system as it stands is just a monster. Really, that's all there is to it. It is a huge amount of over criminalization. Pretty much every kind of activity you can imagine. In every area of life, there might be some kind of law that could put someone's life in jeopardy, if the police choose to enforce that law with the full force of the law. So I hope that gives some food for thought, and I'll talk to y'all later.